Good evening. Welcome. I am Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. I am the superintendent of Hartford Public Schools. And I want to welcome you to our virtual forum on school choice in the greater Hartford region. Buenas tardes. Quiero darles la bienvenida a todos. Están con nosotros para este foro virtual acerca de la selección escolar en la región de Hartford. Y si desean escuchar en el audio con interpretación en español, por favor puede hacer clic en el enlace de Zoom que se le envió por correo electrónico y vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom para proporcionar la interpretación en español durante el seminario web. Y cuando ingrese al seminario web de Zoom, puede mirar hacia el lado derecho, donde van a ver el menú en la pantalla inferior, en la parte inferior de la pantalla, y también pueden hacer clic en el botoncito que contiene la imagen de un globo que pueden ver aquí. Y también pueden volver a hacer clic en el icono del globo y pueden seleccionar Mute Original Audio Channel si no desea escuchar el audio en inglés en lo absoluto. Y también vamos a tener, puede haber comentario en español y puede utilizar el botón que dice Q&A en la barra del menú inferior en la ventana del Zoom. Again, I want to welcome everyone. I do know that we have some board members that are joining us. I believe that board member Yvette Bello is with us, and I don't know if there are any other members that have joined us, but I do want to welcome her and any other board members that join us in the moments to come. I also want to welcome our senior leadership team that is also here with us, and all of you, welcoming you all. And I'll begin with a framing. First, the agenda and objectives, and then just a background as to why we are doing this forum. We're going to first go over the history of school choice and the chef context for the conversation that we'll be having, and to share some draft recommendations to the State Department of Education as it relates to chef and the next iteration of chef, the next evolution of chef. I'll explain a little more about that. And then to get into feedback from our Hartford Public Schools community. And just to give an idea as to why we're engaging in this forum, the state is creating a comprehensive school choice plan as a result of the latest chef agreement. The state is required to conduct community engagement in order to inform that plan, which they actually already gathered at a community forum last week that was open to multiple stakeholders. The district, Hartford Public Schools, also has the opportunity to make recommendations to inform the development of the plan. So the purpose of this session is to hear what matters most to our Hartford Public Schools community regarding school choice. We want to use that feedback to inform the recommendations that we will be making to the state. So we'll share some of our initial thinking as to the recommendations, but then we also want to hear from you so that we can submit some final recommendations to the state. We are not going to be discussing today. There will be no discussion about school choice or the lottery, the magnet lottery, or the enrollment process specifically. But if you do have any questions about any of those, please, we encourage you to call our Welcome Center at 860-695-8400. And just to let you know, we are going to be recording this session because we want to ensure that we accurately capture your feedback. And I know that one more board member has joined us, Mr. Phil Rigger. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And so in our next slide, I will take a few moments to do what I call a step back and just share the history of CHEF. So regional school choice in the Hartford area is governed by a series of agreements between the state and the plaintiffs in the CHEF versus O'Neill case. That lawsuit was brought in 1989 by Hartford resident families to challenge the racial, ethnic, and economic segregation of schools across the entire Hartford region. Then in 1996, the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled in favor of CHEF plaintiffs and clearly stated that Hartford students were, in fact, experiencing racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic segregation, which was in violation of the Connecticut Constitution. In response, the state developed a voluntary interdistrict magnet school programs and open choice program to integrate schools across the region. Since then, the state and the lawsuit plaintiffs have been in long-term negotiations on agreements as to how this program should be implemented, as well as how it should be managed. Our Hartford families have several types of schools to choose from when selecting a school for their student, right? We know that families can opt to send their students to Hartford Public Schools, district schools, what we call our neighborhood schools, that are designated schools for Hartford resident students, usually close to their home. Each student is guaranteed a placement at those schools. Families can also opt to put their student in the lottery for school choice, for a school choice school. There are 5 types of open choice schools, and 4 of those are relevant to the CHEF region school choice conversation that we're having today. So magnet schools, those are themed schools open to all Hartford region students. They can be operated by us at Hartford Public Schools or other organizations or districts like the Capital Region Education Council. There are also the open choice schools, which are district schools open to residents of other towns. So for example, district schools in Manchester open to students, residents from Hartford. There are also the Connecticut Technical High School system, the technical high schools, and the regional agricultural science and technology education centers. Those are also part of the regional school choice offerings, and those are specific academic and career technical prep schools. In the latest agreement that was actually signed last year, the state agreed to develop a comprehensive school choice plan. That plan will set the long-term plan for CHEF to establish stability, sustainability, and predictable and efficient operation of the CHEF integration process. That plan, the comprehensive school choice plan, is due July 1st. And input from Hartford area families is being sought now. There will be another opportunity for feedback once the plan is drafted. This is what we know that the state is looking to do, right? They're going to develop their draft plan, and they're going to allow another opportunity for feedback. And we know that the state also has already hosted an input session, like I mentioned last week. And today we want to gather your input so that we can also inform that plan. A little more information as to what exactly is Hartford Public Schools' role in CHEF. First, I want to clarify that Hartford Public Schools was not part of the lawsuit. CHEF plaintiffs sued the state. However, we at Hartford Public Schools play a role in the chef ecosystem. We are a large feeder district to the chef interdistrict program. We send many students to magnet and open choice schools. Also, we serve as a partner in the implementation of the program. For example, we operate 18 magnet schools and 4 open choice schools. We have a dedicated team in the Office of Enrollment and School Choice, supporting the marketing and recruitment, and supporting our families throughout that process. And as superintendent, I serve on the advisory committee that reviews the chef system and makes non-binding, I get to make non-binding recommendations regarding expansion opportunities. In that advisory capacity, Hartford Public Schools provides recommendations that will inform the state's comprehensive school choice plan. And that plan specifically must include transportation, marketing, and funding for school choice. It also has to include creation of opportunities that are consistent with the demand that families are making for seats. And also, it has to align with our Hartford Neighborhood Schools plan, including making sure that it supports stability and quality of schools in our neighborhoods. That plan, as some of you know, is our district model of excellence, which was developed as after extensive engagement, right? Over 6 months, over 120 engagements that we had with our community in order to create that plan together. And so this is why we're here today. We get to inform how the state aligns with Hartford Neighborhood Schools plan. And we want to make sure that those recommendations that we make to the state are reflective of what our community is telling us, that is reflective and meets the needs of the Hartford Public Schools community. Hartford Public Schools operates 21 district schools and 18 magnet schools. So across those 39 schools, we educate about 18,000 students, including 13,304 Hartford resident students and 4,469 non-Hartford students from about 67 towns. When we look at where all Hartford resident students are educated this year, right, 22,591 Hartford resident students are enrolled across all types of public schools. So as you can see here in our data display, 38% of Hartford resident students attend a Hartford district school. That's roughly the same as the portion of Hartford resident students attending magnet schools. So in total, 51% of Hartford resident students attend chef region school choice schools across magnets, open choice, and that the Connecticut Technical and the VOAG, the vocational agricultural schools that I mentioned before. The remaining 10% attend charter or other school types. And then to the right, I want to just call to mind that magnet and the open choice schools are operated by 5 operators, and they're listed there, right? So including us, Hartford Public Schools, Capital Region Education Council, Goodwin University and Learn, Bloomfield Public Schools operates, as you can see, 2 magnets, and East Hartford Public Schools operates 1 magnet. So that was a little bit of the history and current state as to where are all of the Hartford students, Hartford resident students being served and educated. Now, to get at where we currently are with regard to what did we learn when we engaged our community? Did we implement the district model of excellence, and what are our current challenges? Back in 2017, when we developed the district model of excellence, through that extensive stakeholder engagement, that feedback helped us develop a set of aspirations and non-negotiables that we wanted to achieve that mattered most to our community. And since then, we have seen some successes, but ongoing enrollment decline and, quite frankly, the disruption of the pandemic have impeded our progress. And there have been unintended consequences that Chef has had on our ability to serve all students. With regard to some of the initial aspirations as informed by our community, we wanted to increase the size of schools so that we can reduce the costs and shift some of the resources back into the classroom. This resulted in us consolidating 20% of our schools. We also had an aspiration to increase district funding by attracting new families and additional students to our schools. Also, we sought to distribute funding equitably across our newly configured schools, right? We went from having K-8 schools to having more pre-K-5 schools and then standalone middle schools. And we also wanted to increase enrollment in higher quality, more welcoming school facilities. Our current successes in the middle column, we did increase grade sizes by about 20% on average when we converted from the pre-K-8 to a pre-K-5 and then the middle school model. We also had and still have fewer lower quality, outdated facilities through our closures and our co-locations and some capital improvements. For example, right, we just opened this year the MLK campus that houses not only the MLK middle school, but also Breakthrough Magnet. And then we also had some what we call strategic location of schools. It's something that we heard loud and clear over and over again from our families, that each zone of the city required not only pre-K-5, middle, but also a high school in that zone so that our families could have access. And then one other thing that was important to our families and our community was having specialized programs, especially for our students with exceptionalities and needing additional special education supports. And so we were able to add programs, specialized programs in each one of our zones. Even with those successes, we do still have some current challenges. Decrease in school size, especially in our neighborhood schools and due to declining enrollment, especially this year as a result of the pandemic. Our enrollment declined a few percentage points than what we normally see. Also, there's an increase, what we call an increased concentration of student need, particularly having more English language learners in our neighborhood schools. And then we continue to face revenue decline because when enrollment declines, our revenue and funding for student also declines. However, we do see increasing costs for some of our students with disabilities that attend non-Hartford Public schools that are not in Hartford, operated by Hartford Public Schools. So I think it was important for me to just give you an overview of, yes, the aspirations over the last 3 years, what we were able to do, and some of the real challenges that we still have. So in our next slide, when we think about the choices that the state makes in their new plan, we know that there will be implications, right? Those decisions, those choices will have an impact on Hartford Public Schools. And we see considerations across 5 areas, which actually were the areas of the non-negotiables that were identified when we did the extensive community engagement a few years back, right? Enrollment, right? We know that when more students elect to go to other schools, not in Hartford Public Schools, and regional choice options, it further decreases school sizes, right? The enrollment declines. Even with the consolidation and the shift to a K-5, 6, 8 model that we made through the district model of excellence a few years ago, we continue to see enrollment decline. And there are circumstances in some of our schools that due to the compliance standards related to chef, there are magnet seats that remain unfilled. With regard to funding, like I mentioned in the previous slide, when we have a decline in revenue and an increase in cost, that really threatens our ability to support and meet our students' needs well. And regional magnets charge tuition rates, especially as it relates to students that need additional supports. And that also adds to our funding challenges, right? Our students, whether they're served at an open choice district or another magnet operator, our students have to be served, right, based on their needs. And so that also comes at a cost, and there are challenges that poses for us in Hartford Public Schools. With regard to school programs and operations, we want there are considerations that the state that will have implications for us, and we know that schools' grade levels are inconsistent across district and magnet schools, and it really complicates the experience and the choices for some of our families, right, as students transition between elementary, middle, and high school. There are also gaps and overlaps in some of the themes and the programs that are offered in the region. And there are other more operational challenges. These are, ongoing conversations, for example, with our Board of Education. One is around residency verification, right? We know that, right? I shared that number before, the 22,000 Hartford resident students. They're not all, enrolled with Hartford Public Schools, but they're enrolled, right, across the region. And so that means that the students that are residents, Hartford Public Schools still is responsible for paying the additional costs, especially for students that receive special education supports. And so if a student is not a resident, then their resident town, their school system in that town is then responsible for paying. However, there's no way for us to know that. And so, this is something that we're looking at, and that the board is really, our Hartford Public Schools board is really mindful about and interested in making sure that there are verifications for residency, because again, it is connected to the resources and what we have to pay out. And then there's also this issue. This is something that our families continue to share with us as a concern. It's the class size reductions that happen in November. Every spring, our Hartford Board of Education reviews very, very closely the budget that my team and I recommend. And that budget is recommended based on a lot of things, but primarily on student enrollment. And then you fast forward to the early fall when we're able to determine the exact enrollment that's in our schools. And there's always a decrease in enrollment, which means that there is funding that's not coming that we anticipated. And that means that we have to check on class sizes. Oftentimes, it means that we have to collapse classes. And that means that a teacher, right, there were 2 teachers in a school, and we no longer need those 2 teachers because there are 2 classrooms that have half of the enrollment that we expected. So when we collapse those classes, there's a teacher that no longer has an assignment at that school. So students now have to get acclimated to a new teacher. That teacher then goes to another school in Hartford Public Schools that has a vacancy. So there are these ripples that happen. And so all of these things, right, are part of those considerations that we believe the state has to keep in mind, because they all have implications on Hartford Public Schools. In terms of facilities quality, decreasing neighborhood school budgets also reduces our ability to ensure that all of our schools, all of our buildings are high quality and welcoming environments, right? Because we want to make sure that all students, all of our facilities provide for an equitable experience. And lastly, school location. This was a theme that our families, again, raised for us over and over again throughout the engagement sessions that we had, and making sure that regional choice options are located near and in the neighborhood schools, because our families did mention to us that the options were located far from their local neighborhoods, and it made them inaccessible to our families. And so, keeping all of that in mind, in collaboration with the Hartford Board of Education, we have drafted a set of recommendations to shape the state's plan that takes into account what we have learned and what we continue to try to work through in order to serve all of our students well. So I'm just going to review what the current recommendations are, with an understanding that we're looking forward to your feedback as well. And so additional recommendations that we make to the state might shift depending on the feedback that we hear. With regard to enrollment, a recommendation as to having a structured expansion of regional choice seats, right? If there's going to be an expansion, that it be done over a series of years, and that it takes into account the impact on our neighborhood schools, which we have heard the state say that they are going to take that into account, the impact on our neighborhood schools. Also, that recommending that it allows for choice enrollment beyond October 1st. We know that there is a cutoff date, and families do not have access to magnet seats past October 1st. And of course, to consider the consolidation implications when making school choice policy changes. If additional seats, right, are going to be expanded, then we know that in Hartford Public Schools, we have to take a step back and think about and examine, what does that mean for a need to further consolidate schools or further co-locate schools? We're not sure that that's going to happen, but it might happen. And so we're saying to the state that they have to consider those implications. And we're also recommending a moratorium, a stop on new magnets unless they align with 21st century programming, right? We're saying that we know that the world of work, the demand of different jobs and professions will evolve over the next upcoming years. And so for the state to be mindful when considering themes for potentially new magnets. With regard to funding, making sure that there's equity and consistency with funding that's based on student needs rather than enrollment before October 1st. And that there's funding for the expansion of the community schools model. I'll take a moment to explain that. In some of our neighborhood schools, we have a community school model. And what that is additional resources and partnerships with community partners. We have during school and after school programming and additional supports for students and even for some of our families. And because we know that in our magnet schools, there is a higher level, a concentrated level of need and supports that are necessary, we are saying to the state to consider expanding resources for that model for additional community schools. With regard to school programs and operations, prioritizing pathways for our Hartford Public Schools families. We have some families in our neighborhood schools that would want to and do want to enroll in magnets, and that's not necessarily an opportunity that they have now, unless it's through the lottery. And so, there are potential pathways that can be established. And also recommending a planning process, and this is important for our Board of Education, that maintains the integrity of policies regarding school closure, co-location, and redesign. That's a long way of saying there are policies with regard to local board policies, with regard to closing schools, co-locating, redesigning, reconstituting schools. And there is the policy calls for opportunity to engage with the community and allow the community to co-design and inform that process. And so Hartford, our board felt that the process, if it's a multi-year process, to ensure that it allows for that engagement and co-design opportunity with our community. Facilities matter, and we're recommending equitable access to capital improvement funds to help to ensure that our students in not only in Magnus, but of course in our neighborhood schools have access to high quality facilities. Last time we consolidated, we eliminated all of the level 5. We had a scoring system, and schools that were level 5 were in the worst condition that no student, no staff should be learning and working in. And so we no longer have level 5 facilities. And we're working really hard also to now not have many level 4 schools. And so that is a recommendation that we're making as well. And then school location, that we prioritize new, if there are going to be any new or rethemed schools or seats, that making sure that they promote access from our underserved Hartford neighborhoods. Those are the current set of recommendations, again, aligning with what those 5 areas that were based on the non-negotiables that were identified, and that continue to be the themes that we hear from our families. So now that we've had a refresher on the context of school choice in the region, we want to hear your input on that. This portion of the call will be facilitated to provide guidance and direction in the conversation, so that we can have multiple perspectives, and that we value and that we respect multiple perspectives. It really isn't a question and answer format. Instead, it is an opportunity for your voices to be heard, for your feedback to be shared. And at the end, we can see if there's time to answer any questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. And we also want to just share resources for where you can learn more. If you do happen to have an individual question that you don't want to share today, or need an individual follow-up, we certainly encourage you to reach out to our Welcome Center. And just I know they're here on the screen, but just to reiterate, the questions for you to reflect on, right? What would an excellent set of regional school offerings look like to you, right? That's for you to think about what matters most to you in selecting a school for your child, your children. What about school choice is important to your family? What feedback do you have on our recommendation to the state on their comprehensive school choice design? And specifically, how could we use this as an opportunity to support our neighborhood schools? And then any other thoughts that you have on school choice in Hartford. So I can pause for a moment, and I know that Mr. Fergus is going to help facilitate.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Torres Rodriguez. And thank you to our attendees and any viewers in our YouTube live stream. So to the attendees that are here with us, if you would like to ask a question verbally, there's a raise hand option at the bottom of the webinar that you can click on, and I'll keep an eye on that and allow you that opportunity. You can also add your feedback right in the chat, which we're monitoring. As well as in YouTube, in the chat, we have another member of our team monitoring for any questions there. Whitney P in the chat states, regarding an excellent offering of regional school options, I think it's important that there be parity between magnet and neighborhood schools in terms of what is offered for pre-K. I think all schools should offer universal pre-K 3.
Okay, John, I'm going to try to stick to protocol. I know that I did not do a great job this morning because I just engaged in the conversation. So I just want to acknowledge the Miss Whitney's comment there around the universal pre-K, which is significantly important, especially now, right, that we're thinking about how do we recover and get stronger after the pandemic. And yes, the comment with regard to the equity between neighborhood schools and magnets.
And while we allow a moment there, we do have feedback that we've received in advance. Share some of that. This was submitted to us prior to this session. It seems like neighborhood and HPS magnet schools are in conflict or in a battle for resources. I wonder if HPS sees a path for supporting strong magnets as well as neighborhood schools.
Yeah, John, I appreciate that. It is the one resonating, recurring theme that we heard right 3 years ago when we did the deep engagement, and continue to hear. Not as prevalent now, but I will tell you that I have to give kudos to our board for, right, 2 years ago, we worked together to develop the equity-centered budget development process and budget formula that took exactly that into account, which I also think gets to what Ms. Whitney's comment was about ensuring the equity. And we were mindful to have a budget formula that addressed and provided additional resources to schools that needed the additional resources, which for the most part were neighborhood schools, but that also there was the formula that if a magnet school, for example, needed additional supports to support students that were chronically absent or disengaged, that they also received those supports. We also were careful to have a magnet school supplement, because we also didn't want to completely, say to a magnet school, well, now you can't offer the theme that we also know is important to some of our families and students. So it was a delicate process, yet we were able to develop a budget-centered formula and allocation. So it is something that we continue to think about, because I know that we are all committed to equity, and equity means that there are times that students, whether individually, a class, a school, a community, right, requires additional levels of support and resources.
In our chat from Yvette Bello, an excellent school offering for me includes strong academics that cover basics, reading, writing, math, critical thinking, personal growth in safe school climates that includes conflict transformation. It would also include art, math, science, and athletics.
Mm-hmm. Lots of themes that we heard when we engaged with our family, and still actually many of these were very prevalent during in the last just 2 months, when we did over 50 hours of engagement with our stakeholders to develop our current plan and to make sure that we could use the COVID relief funding. And so what Ms. Bello is highlighting here were many of the pieces that our families and our students identified for us.
In the chat from Whitney, if the purpose of school choice is to promote racial and economic integration, if a magnet school is already in a neighborhood that, it just bounced. Let me just get my place back. In a neighborhood that is very racially and economically diverse, could it revert back to a neighborhood school?
So that, I'm breaking protocol, but I'm going to answer it because these are some great questions. I know that would entail, of course, a decision at the state and with the plaintiffs. I do believe that, and this was pre my arrival to Hartford Public Schools, there was a school that was a magnet and converted to a neighborhood school. I believe it was, it is now our Milner Middle School. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen in the future, but I'm just trying to think about when it did happen. But I know that the state would have to be, and the plaintiffs would have to be part of that process. But certainly feedback that we're going to provide.
From Jeffrey Agbar in the chat, I would like to know how the basic goals of the Chef case, resources, equity of outcomes, etc., can be measured beyond race. For example, wouldn't local public schools benefit from a mix of socioeconomic status among Black and Latino households? And my limited anecdotal experience suggests that higher income families tend to send their children to private schools? Do economic demographic measures factor into access?
I know that, and that's great feedback as well for the state. I know that the state did have lots of considerations around not just what Mr. Agbar is saying here with regard to socioeconomic status, also educational attainment, Mr. Agbar, was something that the state considered as well. So I will forward all of these pieces for, I believe you're talking about a broader definition of integrating a broader definition beyond race.
How does HPS carry a burden to create racial or ethnic desegregation rather than other towns that are less diverse? Shouldn't more effort be placed on less diverse districts to be more inclusive?
Yeah, no, that is one we can certainly, we will forward as well. I know that there's the open choice program that our neighboring towns, suburban towns participate in. I know that some towns participate at different rates, meaning different varying amounts of seats offered in the towns that are less diverse.
A question or feedback that we received in advance. I like the open dates for enrollment as families move to Hartford throughout the school year. It can be confusing that some schools are available while others are closed. I wanted all three of my children to attend our neighborhood walkable school, and with work, I was able to get them all to attend that one school. And I believe that funding should be based on student need.
Yeah, that is a challenge. And our families actually say it's an inconvenience at times. Not being able to enroll past the October 1st timeline, and children, right, siblings not being able to enroll in the same school, even if they're within the grade level of that school.
If you can give the state feedback on the lottery process itself, please look into the New York City model. The ranked choice placement is more straightforward for parents.
Excellent.
I really like, in the chat, I really like the idea of creating multiple pathways to magnet enrollment that was mentioned.
Yes, that, we tried really hard to, when we did the district model of excellence, that is exactly what we did with the neighborhood schools. We heard it loud and clear for families as to neighborhood schools and magnets, right? All of these different grade level configurations, and it's really confusing. And our families actually categorize that challenge as part of safety. There were two ways that our families described wanting safety. One was with regard to just safe, welcoming school environments, and then safety with like not knowing what their pathway for their child was going to be when leaving, for example, elementary school. They weren't sure what the middle school option and pathway was for their child. So we did reconfigure the district, and now we solve for that on the neighborhood school side. But as you all are now aware, solving for that at the open choice magnet side is, requires other partners as part of that work, that plan.
Will the open choice agreement also be updated? Magnet students only bring 2/3 of their student dollars into the district. Why, and can that amount be increased?
That is feedback that we will certainly bring to the state. Right, if one of the key points that the plan must include is around funding for school choice. And so that is a great question.
So that is the summary of the feedback in the chat. We didn't have any questions in YouTube, and it covered the questions that we had in advance.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fergus. And I want to again thank you all for taking time out to join us, and most importantly, sharing your perspective, your thinking, and your feedback and ideas for the recommendations that we'll make to the state. And as a reminder, we're asking for your input now to inform those recommendations as the state develops their comprehensive school choice plan that is due on July 1st. And know that there will be another opportunity for input once the state has a draft plan. So we can share that information with you at a later date. If you do have additional thoughts that you'd like to share, please provide the input by May 28th so that we can provide it to the state ahead of their deadlines. And I believe, John, can we send that? Do we have the input and question form via the Zoom, the chat?
Yes, we can add that there, and it's the link to the form is also in the promotional flyer for this event.
The invite. Great. Okay, well, again, thank you, everyone. I wish you a restful evening and a great rest of the week ahead. Thank you.